Free sewing patterns are all over the internet, accessible to all of us. I recently found the Zadie top from craftworld.com. You can sign up for a free account and you'll have access to this pattern and many others. The pattern features a front and back seam and cuffs, making it a great color blocking and scrap busting project. You can also choose to omit the front and back seams and cut your fabric on the fold for a different look. I'm sewing the size 8 today with no changes to the pattern. This is a quick and easy sewing project, especially as there are no zippers or buttons. I hope you sew it with me. Let's get started. Here is one of my front bodice pieces, and I'm going to finish that center front edge using my serger. And I'll do this to finish those center front edges of my opposite front piece. Then I'll place my front pieces right sides together and pin the center front. Sew with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and press the seam open. Repeat all of those steps to construct your back bodice piece, finishing both of those center edges and then pinning the back pieces right sides together. Then sew at 5/8 of an inch and press the seam open. Now I'll place my front and back bodice pieces right sides together, pinning the shoulders and the side seams. Then I'll sew each side seam and each shoulder seam with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Finish those raw edges together and press them toward the back of the garment. I've applied interfacing to the wrong side of both of the facing pieces. Now I'm going to place them right sides together at the shoulders and pin. Then sew these seams at 5/8 of an inch and press the seams open. Then I'll finish the raw edges of the facing all the way around the outer edge. Now we can place the facing right sides together with the neckline and pin all the way around, matching those shoulder seams. And then we'll sew the facing to the neckline with a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way around. Now I'll clip into the curves of the neckline, careful not to clip through the main stitching line. Now we're ready to understitch the facing, turning it over its seam allowance, and then sew that facing to the seam allowance underneath with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. Once the facing is understitched, turn it to the inside. And to make sure that the facing stays nicely to the inside of the garment, we're going to stitch in the ditch at both of the shoulder seams. Make sure that the shoulder seam of the garment and the shoulder seam of the facing perfectly align with one another, and stitch from the outside of the garment right inside of that main seam, from the neckline to the bottom of the facing on the inside. Doing this for both shoulders. And give that neckline edge a good press. Here is one of my cuff pieces. I decided to blend both fabrics together to create one cuff piece. Now I'm going to fold this cuff piece right sides together and sew the short edges with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and press the seam open. Now that I have my underarm seam pressed open, I'll fold this cuff piece in half, wrong sides together, and give that a good press. Now I'll place the cuff piece right sides together with its corresponding armhole and pin all the way around, matching the underarm seams. I've done this to form both cuffs and pin them to each side of the bodice. Now I'm going to sew the cuffs to the bodice with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, finish the raw edges, and press those seams toward the bodice. For the final bottom hem, you can decide how deep of a hem you'd like to create. I'm going to take it to the ironing board and fold the raw edge to the wrong side by 1/2 inch. Then once again, rolling it on top of itself by another 1/2 inch, I'll press that hem in place. I've pinned those pressed edges in place. Now I'm going to edge stitch close to that upper inner fold all the way around the bottom hem. And now the top is complete. Thank you for watching this sew along. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future sewing tutorials, and I'll see you in the next video.